one of the questions that always comes to in terms of solution architecting, right? So, like for example, Kumar, who comes from the like 18 years of background in his career, and then he since few years he's working on the solutioning side of things. He of course definitely worked on a lot of different domains, but healthcare is one of his forte, and that's where like a lot of challenges comes when we start building different types of architecture for different types of domain. But when it comes to the healthcare, there are specific questions. There are some things that we need to make sure that we are doing it correctly, right? So so there are few aspects, like a few areas that as far as my experience is concerned, definitely is common things in every domain, right? So what kind of users you are expecting, so that also affects your architecture. How much latency needs, request and response latency, you the customers are expecting, because some of our customers are having like strong SLAs with their customers, with like even like one of our customer has like 50 millisecond P99 requirement, where like your 99 request should be finished within less than 50 milliseconds. And that's kind of considering the complexity of the application and whatnot. So we have to make sure that we are actually adhering to those SLAs. There are other areas also when it comes to architecture. So there are some important factors which plays an important role as well. So Kiran, what do you think? What other areas do you think, based on your experience, plays an important role when you are actually starting building the solutions, right? And I believe like when you're interacting with the customers in initial stage, or like in discovery call, or like in even initial like what we call like design sprint, where in initial requirement gathering stage, what are the crucial questions that you always ask to those customers?
Yeah. Yes, Praveen. So mainly the thing is, so whenever we take the requirements, so the requirements are being broadly classified into two parts, mainly the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. So functional requirements are helpful mainly for meeting the business needs and delivering as part of that functional requirements. And non-functional requirements are the key decisions, or the key driving factors, so that makes an architecture to be built, starting from the base architecture to the final architecture. And in the part of non-functional requirements, so mainly from the business or from the customer. So we should be knowing about so what is the volume? What is the volume of the users that are accessing the product or the application? So, for example, so based on that, the architecture is being considered in such a way. So where these non-functional requirements mainly on some key terms like scalability, availability, reliability, resiliency. And I'll be talking about the other non-functional requirements like security and performance also. So first we have to consider this. So what is the volume of how many users are going to access the application? So the total user base. So say, for example, if that product is going to launch, or the application is going to launch in the market newly. So we have to see like, so since they don't have the current user base going on, so the estimates, so for example, within 6 months, what is the user base? And after 6 months, or within 1 year, or after 2 years, so what is the projected growing user base of it? And so based on that, so we'll be planning the capacity of the systems that will be hosted for this application of product. And in addition to that, we also actually should know about the concurrent users, the number of concurrent users, the expected concurrent users, which we consider about the peak load, because especially this is the driving factor where, so during the peak load, we should, the architecture should be in such a way, or the system should be in such a way, it should not degrade the performance of the application or product. So we should know about the concurrency, or the number of users at a time they are accessing the application. So which we call it as a peak load. And based on that, so these are some things. And then what is the expected? So generally, as per standard, we go with the request response times. So as per common applications, we'll be having request response time should be less than 1 second. If it is an online request or response, if it is a batch request response, it should not exceed more than 10 minutes, like that. So we have that kind of scenarios, but again, we should actually get these details. We'll be getting these details from the business. So what is it expected? Because actually there are some applications, for example, where the customers will expect like within 100 milliseconds we should get the request response, because their application can be highly transactional based applications. For example, if we can consider like an e-commerce based application or a banking application, so where the response should be within less than 100 milliseconds. And coming to the healthcare based applications also, so where actually if it is a kind of where there is a requirement for online health monitoring related systems, so even those are all highly transactional based applications. So even the customer expects with very less latency, the request response time will be baseline. So considering these request response time, number of users, the number of the peak load, then we design the capacity and also the thing is we'll not consider the entire capacity at one stage, because as I was telling, we'll consider the initial user base and then the projected user base, and based on that we keep on ramping up our system capacity. So those things. And apart from that, so mainly for healthcare and banking domains, we will be considering about the security. So we also need to consider about the security. So these are the main things that we consider for these architecture relations.
Rightly said, Kiran. Kumar. So basically, even I believe like there are some customers, they have some compliance needs, right? So the audits happen, and then we need to make sure that our servers, right, or the like even the infrastructure is pretty much secured enough, right, with the compliance needs. Specifically when it comes to HIPAA as well, right? So AWS has that ABA agreement in place, and even like we have to make sure that everything is planned as per the compliance that is needed. But different domains, of course, healthcare, HIPAA is in healthcare, but there are other compliance needs as well. One more thing.
Yes, right. Yeah. Yes,
correct. Right. One more question, Kumar, like on this side, right? So I believe there are some customers, they even like we need to ask about the monitoring needs. So there are different types of monitoring, of course, but those are also important aspects, right? So what type of monitoring we need, whether it's log monitoring, whether it's performance monitoring, and like proactive alerting and whatnot, right? So I believe those kind of discussions are also happening when you're doing the discovery.
Yes, rightly, Praveen. The thing is, these monitoring aspects. So as part of the thing, so this monitoring can be included as a separate activity, and even this monitoring can be as a part of security also. So when you are telling about the compliance, yes, for healthcare we'll be having this HIPAA compliance, and even for financial sectors we'll be having the banking related, proprietary related compliances. And when we consider these compliance issues, one of the key factors that we consider is the auditing actually. And auditing is again a sub-solution as part of monitoring. Like in this auditing, we'll be mainly tracking the logs and who has actually accessed the systems, and is there any actually a legitimate user or accessing this. So we'll be logging all the tracks. So at which time. So this is a part of one monitoring session. So that will be included as part of security. And separately, if you need to monitor, so that is actually as part of the performance related things. Say, for example, so the scalability. So where we include for that is for auto scaling. If more traffic comes, so the auto scaling will ensure that it will actually scale out the nodes, servers, and everything. And in regard to this, even there are kind of an alerting system also. So in case of any errors that are occurring, so that the system will not be degraded. So these alerts will actually immediately intimate to the development team or intimate to the users, so that they can take the actions appropriately in the proper time. So these are the things that we consider as part of these monitoring solutions.
Right. Good. Great. Yeah. Thanks, Kiran. I think one of the quick thing that came in my mind recently when I was speaking with one of the customers, their compliance needs was like having an archival system, right? So whatever files they have to archive for, let's say, 10 years, and then after that we can delete. So we need a proper strategy for that, so that the cost will be also saved. Like for example, AWS has that archival stuff, and that is very cheap, right? So the proper strategies in place are going to play an important role, not only in terms of the compliance needs, but also for the cost savings, right? So that the business doesn't suffer from a lot of cloud costs.
Exactly. So the same will be applicable for these logs and audit trails also. So if you need to maintain the historical data, so going with the primary solutions for the log data source will be costly effective. So we can maintain last 6 months or 3 months of the data, and then we can use these archival systems for the retention policies.